Now for our next panel, Islands Are Rising for Aquaculture Industries. Hafaday and welcome to the Administrator and CEO of the Guam Economic Development Authority, Mel Mendiola.
Day and good morning, everyone. My name is Mel Mendiola, and I'm happy and honored to be facilitating today's panel concerning aquaculture. Joining us today, we have a number of talented individuals. From right here in Guam, we have David Crisostomo, Aquaculture Specialist at the University of Guam Sea Grant. We have Kai Fox, Project and Partner Coordinator, Aquaculture Extension Specialist for the Center for Sustainable Aquaculture and Coastal Resources. Kai, I think you're in Hawaii, unless, please correct me if I'm wrong. Martin Selch from Micronesia Management and Marketing Enterprise in Kosrae. Uipo McCarty, Oyster Aquaculture Manager, Kualoa Ranch. Todd, Aquaculture Development, Hawaii Department of Agriculture. Tori Spence McConnell, Fishery Policy Analyst, Sustainable Fisheries, NOAA, NMFS, Pacific Islands Regional Office. So we are chock full of qualified individuals today to discuss aquaculture as we move forward, as we move our island economies forward. All right, so welcome everyone.
Morning, good morning.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. It's going to be exciting.
Excellent. The only one I can see on my screen is David. I was just, okay, now I see Martin. Great.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Morning. I'll give just one more moment for everyone to join me. Hi, Tori and Todd. Welcome, Todd. Welcome, Kai. All right. Okay. I think we have just about, oh, Kuipo disappeared. Okay, great. I think we have just about everyone, so we can go ahead and kick off. Okay, so our first question is, I need each of you to give me your best aquaculture joke, aquaculture or fish joke or pun. Don't clam up now. All right, why don't we start with David Crisostomo from Guam.
I just, I couldn't think of one as hard as I tried.
Do you need time to mull it over?
Yes, a lot of time.
How about you, Martin? Do you have an aquaculture pun or joke for us?
I followed David. I tried to think hard about one. I know other jokes, but not for aquaculture. I'm sorry.
I think it's time for this group to come out of its shell. How about you, Todd? Do you have an aquaculture pun or joke for us?
Yeah, what happens when you put Nutella on salmon? You get salmonella.
All right, how about you, Kai?
Okay, I'll try it. A farm-raised tilapia walks into a bar and the bartender asks it, "What can I get you?" The fish says, "Water."
All right. Not bad, not bad. How about you, Kuipo? Oh, we can't hear you just yet. Tori, do you want to tell us your joke while we're waiting for Kuipo to come back to us?
Sure, I'll give it a try. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. How about this? Why are fish so easy to weigh? Because they bring their own scales.
That's a good one too. I like it. The example I gave was, why don't oysters give to charities? Because they're shellfish. Okay, that's enough bivalve humor for the morning. All right, so thank you again. Thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to having this nice short conversation, and I'm sure there will be a lot of follow-up. Okay, great. We have Kuipo back. Do you want to do a sound check?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, great. We are ready for your
Okay.
joke.
Why do oysters make better politicians than fish?
Why is that?
They can filter their comments under pressure and can clam up when the going gets rough.
Now that was the finale joke. I love it. I love it.
I have
That's
to credit my boss, Taylor Kellerman. He started it.
I like it. I like it. All right. So look, why don't we go ahead and kick off with our gentlemen from the Sea Grant programs. So Kai and Dave, why don't you go ahead and so starting with Mr. David Crisostomo from University of Guam, why don't you share with us the type of research going on at the University of Guam and how this ties into some of your activities in the community?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Dr. Jiang is our aquaculture researcher at the university. She's with the experiment station. And she has I've asked her what some of her projects are. She focuses on health management of seed stock. So the larvae and the post-larvae and the fry out of the hatchery and that kind of aspect. And one of her projects is to improve the capacity for agricultural biotechnology and molecular diagnostics research and education. And so that's a mouthful, but basically it's in the lab doing a lot of detailed analysis and things like that. Another project that she is on and includes myself and Dr. Chen, the agriculture economist, is to look at promoting sustainable aquaculture practices in Guam. And one of those practices will be an aquaponic system, and that we are going to be setting up a small commercial scale aquaponic system and some recirculating aquaculture systems within the area known as the Aqua Park, which is being renovated at the moment. And from there, we will be doing trainings within the community and demonstrate aquaponics. There are some new techniques that have been made available in the last 10 years or so to increase production in aquaponics, increase the plant production with the same amount of fish. So that's kind of exciting. And we're looking towards trying to approach a zero waste kind of a system, and that we utilize all the waste from the fish to produce the plants, and any excess coming out of there would go to a compost pile or something and can contribute to land plants or in-ground plants. And so there are those systems. How that applies to the community would basically be
turning them over to achieve a goal. You can choose to strain the curry sauce to ensure it's as smooth as possible before you serve. Cook the rice with.
I don't know who's got their mic on. Sorry. We have some other recirculating aquaculture systems planned to come out from our Sea Grant program and go into a couple of the mayor's offices, a couple of nonprofits, and maybe even a individual family home situation that has access to a larger community of learners who are interested in coming in and doing that. And I can get a little bit more into that because I think that will come up again a little bit later.
Okay.
So I'll let Kai go ahead and tell us about his activities.
Sure, Kai, please share with us what's going on in Hawaii.
Okay. Thanks. So I'm going to talk about what's going on in the UH system. Okay. There's obviously a lot of stuff going on in private sector in NELHA and also at the Oceanic Institute, but in UH system, and this is probably not an exhaustive list. Unfortunately, we don't have an accurate running list of all the different projects that are going on with aquaculture, but I have some of the most significant ones probably. Maria Haas is at the Pacific Aquaculture and Coastal Resources Center is involved with, and her faculty members out there are involved generally in projects with coral propagation. They've developed the co-op oyster farm in Hilo Bay. They grow food fish, ornamental fish, and do a lot of work with microalgae and macroalgae. Ongoing projects, long list of projects involved with all of those organisms. Andre Seal at UH Manoa campus is building out, almost finished with the Tuahini Aquaculture Research and Extension Center. This is essentially a new lab for him. His previous lab was at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, where he does work with fish physiology, endocrinology, and urihaline research, ability of fish to adapt from seawater to freshwater back and forth. The facility he's building out is a completely recirculating aquaculture system that can be that can hold water at any salinity. So a urihaline research RAS, and he'll be studying, at least in the beginning, tilapia, mullet, native striped mullet, and sea cucumbers. Also within and that's within the College of Tropical Ag and Human Resources. Within that department, also in HENFAS, is Dr. Rajesh Shah, who's done a lot of work with aqua feeds, developing aqua feeds. Dr. Samir Kanal in MBBE does work with aquaponics and looking at the greenhouse gases associated with aquaponics during nitrogen transformations of the, after feeding, conversion of ammonia to nitrate. JP Bingham in MBB also does work with limpets, Hawaiian limpets and cone snail venom. And Ted Radovich out at the Waimanalo Ag Station, he's in TPSS in College of Tropical Ag and Human Resources, does a lot of work with community backyard aquaponics and research in aquaponics. Some of the work that I've been involved with related to this stuff is kind of transitioning from the Malama program with Ted Radovich into the community. We partnered with the College of Sea Grants, partnered with the College of Tropical Ag and Human Resources and the Go Farm program, which is a farmer training program to develop a Go Fish program, which is basically an introduction to aquaponics. And current Go Farm participants are offered a project to enroll in a hybrid virtual and face-to-face workshop series to learn how to integrate aquaponics or aquaculture into their existing small to medium scale aquaculture or terrestrial agriculture operation.
Wow, what a diverse array of projects going on at the University of Hawaii system. And it's really wonderful to see that with the connection with the University of Guam that the University of Hawaii has traditionally had, that brings a lot of resources, I think, to the region in general, as far as building our knowledge in this area. Now shifting over a little bit to our business ventures, Martin, on the beautiful island of the Sleeping Lady in Kosrae, can you talk to us a little bit about your giant clam operation? Who are your customers and things like that?
All right, thank you very much for having me. I'm really proud of being on this panel here. I'm being in Kosrae for 16 years. And started with one species of clams. The facility is owned by the national or now by the state government and we're leasing it. We are a completely private entity and we earn our living from shipping out all around the world to wholesalers our clams to the ornamental trade. So by now we producing 6 species of giant clams and we have 2 coral farms where we fragment corals. So our products are completely cultured. Nothing is taken from the wild. The ornamental trade with the 2 coral farms gives us a living. And with this, we were able to culture a high number of uipo clams, which is not really an ornamental species, but it's a depleted species. It's easy to harvest, and our reefs are all over the world. Especially here in Micronesia, we eat them, we like them. Here on Kosrae, we have almost no more uipo at all. They're easy to harvest, they stay right in the seagrass area. And over-harvesting, if the species gets too far apart, they're relying on the current to bring them together and to fertilize the larvae. And over-harvesting is just the biggest problem. So we were able to reseed in Kosrae more than 100,000 uipo seeds. We installed for a community in Utwi Biosphere a coral clam farm for them. So you start with tables, cage tables, you put cement plates on, and you let the juvenile clams, when first we spawn them in our hatchery, of course, keep them in larvae tanks for 5 days, and then we put them in the raceway. After up to 14 days, they are in the swimming stage. After 14 days, they settle down, and then they become a clam. And after 6 months or so, we can harvest them and put them into the ocean where they grow much faster than on the land-based area. So from the table with the semen plates, they still attached. They then, as they grow, moving out from the table and getting in simple cages where they can sit in there and grow again. And then you refill the table again with seed clamps. So you have a rotation, and after 6 to 12 months, you can rotate and grow more and more clams and build more and more cages. And after 3 to 5 years, they're supposed to be big enough to start spawning, and then eventually start natural spawnings and reseed the ocean outside of protected areas.
So now, giant does how giant do your giant clams typically become before you start exporting them for sale?
For ornamental trade, it depends on the species, but the most common species for ornamental trade is Tridacna maxima and Tridacna crocea. They're between 3 to 5 centimeters. It takes us 2 to 3 years to grow. The Rasa goes much faster. The Rasa goes much faster, and Squamosa as well. So those species are much quicker to grow and easier.
How very interesting. Okay, now turning it over from ornamental to food sources, to Kuipo over at Kualoa Oyster. So Kuipo, I checked out the website, but I found Kualoa Ranch. And it says Kualoa Grown's slogan is locally grown, responsibly raised food for Hawaii. Can you talk to us a little bit about this? And also please discuss the significance of native Hawaiian fish ponds.
Very fortunate to have a 4,000-acre ranch. So we have a variety of products that we grow. We grow cows and we sell our beef. We grow pigs and sell our pork. We have fruits, vegetables, flowers, shrimp, tilapia, and our most recent one is the oysters. We started oysters in the Hawaiian fish pond about 10 years ago in research and development, and we've been certified for consumption sale for 7 years from the Department of Health. And we want to use our land to feed our people and share our guests. And so everything is grown on our land in the most organic ways that we can. And then our local market, our during pandemic particularly, is when our guests from around the world weren't coming, we created our Kualoa Grown market, and it really has blown up, and it has consistently been bringing in a lot of people and feeding a lot of people in the last year or so.
That's wonderful. And you're using a native Hawaiian fish pond for this purpose, correct?
That's correct. And not only are we able to, I mean, oysters are just so sustainable because in the changes in the Hawaiian fish pond over the many years, we've gotten very predator-based rather than just being the mullet and herbivores that was traditionally done. And because the herbivores weren't there to take up the excess algae and the nutrients, our oysters has become a substitute for that. And so they are making the water much cleaner without over algae blooms and et cetera for the fish that we do have, so that really are wonderfully sustainable for keeping the health of our pond up. And then being able to produce wonderful food for our people is a plus on that.
Right. I think everyone sees the picture on the screen. That's absolutely beautiful, these oysters that you're producing. That's wonderful. Now let's turn it over to our regulatory friends. So Todd and Tori, thank you for joining us. You both have roles as protectors and stewards for the aquatic life, at the Department of Aquatic Resources and NOAA. Please share with us a little bit about your responsibilities. How about we start with Tori? Do you want to go first, and then Todd?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I wanted to thank everyone also for having me today. It's really a pleasure to be here and to hear what our colleagues are up to and celebrate all the cool stuff going on with aquaculture in the Pacific. So this is a blast. My role here at NOAA, we're focused on supporting sustainable aquaculture development. So a lot of what I do involves connecting with researchers and managers and industry and community stakeholders all around the topic of aquaculture. So in the Pacific Islands region, we do have a really long history, and we also have current support for aquaculture in a lot of different forms. That's something that, in my experience, is really special and unique about this area. I've lived in other places on the mainland in the US, and it's the diversity of species and systems that are currently used here. It's really, really cool. So there's a lot of great opportunities here for expanding responsible aquaculture. And for that, it would really help diversify the economy. It can help add local jobs and obviously contribute to food security. Side note on that too, I am also someone who has been to the Kualoa market, and I really love being able to go there and have that local source for food. So it's really cool to see this kind of stuff in action. So what we want to do at NOAA, we want to help support that responsible and sustainable development. So we like to try and join stakeholders together in conversation, a lot of like, what we're doing today. We also want to help develop and evaluate and then also transfer technologies that can be useful for aquaculture to continue sustainably in the future. And probably the biggest thing that we do and that we want to do is to help provide consistent and simplified regulatory processes, and then also guidance on those processes in cooperation with other government agencies. So here at NOAA, we're focused on offshore aquaculture primarily, and those are some of the pictures you see here on the top two photos. Those are two farms that are currently operating in the offshore waters in Hawaii, one in state waters, one in federal. But my primary activity right now is actually to help develop the environmental analysis that's going to be an underlying and foundational factor if we do want to try and develop an aquaculture management system that would hopefully be more comprehensive and coordinated. So I can talk more about that later, but I just wanted to reiterate too, our focus at NOAA is offshore aquaculture in federal waters, but nonetheless, we're here to help foster thoughtful growth and support the needs of stakeholders throughout the region with any kind of aquaculture, because we recognize that you can't have offshore without onshore and everything's connected. So back to you.
Thank you so much. And Todd, welcome.
Thanks, Mel. And I echo Tori's comments about appreciating everybody on the panel and the ability to and opportunity to learn more about what's going on in the Pacific. I am the manager of the Aquaculture Development Program here at the state Hawaii Department of Agriculture. So we don't have any regulatory oversight per se, but we are facilitators and advocates for the aquaculture industry in the state of Hawaii, both onshore and offshore, and covering both plants and animals, freshwater to saltwater. So a lot of the pictures that Tori has is similar to the pictures that I would have put up, so I'll borrow hers. These are the different kinds of operations that we have statewide. Our challenge, of course, is because Hawaii is a series of islands, there's not a direct connection between all of them, as you guys know. And there's logistics, there's different market sizes and different business opportunities that go on. So we are more of the commercial aspect of the aquaculture business. But one of the issues the topics that we're talking about now, and this is talking with our academic colleagues as well as the government people, is the idea of restorative aquaculture, similar to what Martin has been talking about, and how that connects using aquaculture practices to support conservation efforts. And if we can, we know that all these different activities are going on already, but with a little bit of coordination, I believe we can get much more strategic at it, and therefore tap into larger funding sources and hopefully move the needle both for conservation efforts and commercial aspects of it. So let's see, being in the state, we have different departments as everybody has in their different governments. The Department of Land and Natural Resources looks at the physical parts of the state and how commercial operations or any operation affects it. Parts of the Department of Agriculture look at imports, species imports, and movement of animals and animal health. So we are sort of the middle piece of it at the state level, as Tori is at the federal level. And we are overlapping in different areas, and we hope that we can collaborate and move things forward in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Most definitely. I mean, this is the words coordination, simplification will certainly help move the region forward as far as growing this industry. Now, continuing to build on that, you had mentioned a bit about restorative aquaculture. So can we hear a little bit from Kai and Dave? Restorative aquaculture just seems like a great opportunity. But with opportunities, there are also challenges. Maybe Kai, you can share any sort of major challenges you see. Guam is, and Hawaii are similar in that we have to deal with the US EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, DAR, right? All of these different regulatory agencies. These can prevent challenges for somebody who's looking to maybe an entrepreneur looking to get into the world of aquaculture. But there are opportunities as well. So maybe you can talk a little bit about challenges and opportunities, both.
Sure. Thanks, Mel. And yeah, and this is not going to be an exhaustive list again, but I'll try my best for this because I think this is a really complicated issue, and there's a lot of things at play. But generally speaking, I think in the United States and we have high standards, and so we're competing against when we're talking specifically about food importation, in which Hawaii we import over 85% of the things that we consume. I'm not exactly sure how it is in Guam or other US affiliated Pacific Islands, but I imagine it's kind of similar. So, and the reason for that is because our farmers have difficulty competing against farmers in other regions whose governments allow things like unregulated discharge, indiscriminate use of antibiotics, and then there's the labor issue, a sort of unregulated workforce, people perhaps not being paid a fair and living wage. So these are some of the main challenges that our farmers, specifically food producers locally, face. And it's analogous to the ag industry in general. In Hawaii, it's the cost of feed, the cost of land, the cost of electricity. But there's also a lot of opportunity. Also in Hawaii, surprisingly, we import over 60% of our seafood. And the seafood that we do consume locally, only a fraction of it is produced by aquaculture. The opportunities are also that, so there's an opportunity to increase the market share for local growers. And also we have a very diverse climate. We have, over 500,000 acres of land and water and 140-ish thousand acres of coastal lands in which we could potentially do something like mariculture. So there's multiple microclimates with the potential to grow virtually anything in Hawaii. So there's a lot of opportunity and challenges.
Great. And I thank David as well for putting up the opportunities and constraints slide with regard to Guam aquaculture. In the interest of time, I'm just going to move on to one kind of steer us in a different direction. Just talking a little bit about the marketability of aquaculture projects. Moving over to uipo. Kualoa is the only, I read that Kualoa is the only oyster farm in Oahu. No? Okay, inaccurate.
Okay. Sorry about that, folks, but there are a couple other fish ponds that have been dabbling in oysters also. There's a small pond in Hualalai, which is a resort on the Big Island, and they're only growing for their own resort. Nomilu is a fish pond that has just recently come up certified also. And then Maria Haas does have consumption at her oysters. So there are other farms, but I would say we're probably the most scaled up and the largest.
Okay, great. And that leads me to the question I was going to ask on this was, how do you go about improving your product when it comes to scaling? Do you hire off-island, do you hire mainland consultants? Do you do a lot of experimental work with UH? Do you just do a lot of taste testing yourself?
We do a lot of farmer experiments where people don't look over my shoulder and ask me to do numbers and analyze it. We kind of we have helped, definitely have had assistance from Maria Haas when we first started out, but as for doing our quality, we've had a lot of challenges. We had blister worms, we've had barnacles, we've had bryozoan competition, other things. So Mother Nature is, everybody thinks, oh, you take an oyster, you just throw it out there, come back in 6 months, no problem, not so much. We've had to learn by experience, trial and error, different things that we've had to do to control bycatch our biggest challenge has been the mud blister worm, but we have just kind of worked out a process to basically soak in fresh water overnight, every basket once a week. And it's very labor intensive, but it's worked for the past 3 years. So that was an accomplishment. And so As for quality wise, you know, there's that thing that chefs always say, the terroir makes the grape that makes the wine. Well, of course, the miroir is what gives the flavor to the oyster. So any oyster, the same seed you can grow in Hilo and in a fish pond, and it will taste definitely different. So I do believe some of the blessings and the quality of our animals comes from the taste of the Hawaiian fish pond water.
Excellent. So the next time I'm at a fancy restaurant, I will certainly drop the miroir. You can certainly taste the miroir.
I've played with chefs a little bit on that, and I've even had to teach a chef or two that term. They always like it.
That is that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So now turning it over to Tori, I know you have quite a bit of experience kind of working with farmers, working with aquaculture, or working with growers, et cetera, not only from this job, but from other jobs that you've had in the past. Perhaps you can share with the audience some of the practices that you've observed that are shifting towards more sustainable operations, or even best practices that you've observed over the years in your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of funny to hear, you know, everyone's kind of echoing too this, like, the concern for the complicated regulatory environment is like one of the greatest barriers to industry. And that's definitely something that I've heard in my experience too. And there's a lot of, I think I mentioned earlier, a lot of different species and systems that are raised out here, and a lot of ways to do it. And so we have people like Kui here, like, just experimenting on the farm and making sure that, like, doing what you can at the best to your ability, and like that's how you get a good product. But from a NOAA perspective, you know, what can we do to help that? Well, we can try and streamline some of those permitting processes. So something that I've been working on here is actually this. It's called a programmatic environmental impact statement, and it's this big programmatic analysis, big environmental analysis that's going to underlie any sort of comprehensive streamlined management program. And that program is pretty far off, but in order to create a program like that well, and that takes all of the environmental and socioeconomic concerns into play, we really need to have a strong foundational analysis for that. So you know, that's actually a way that a lot of our listeners today could get involved, because this environmental impact statement is going to be coming out for public comment soon. And it's just a draft. We're looking for any and all input. So if you have input that you'd like to share, we really encourage you to submit a public comment on that once it becomes available, which should be very soon, within the next couple of weeks. Because again, we just want to make sure that environmental analysis, and in our definition of the environment, that includes the social environment as well. We want to make sure that foundation is the best it can be, so that, as you know, if the West Pacific Fishery Management Council should decide to create a more streamlined permitting program, then they have a strong environmental foundation to do so.
Excellent. So there was a question from the audience from Don that said, I'm interested in whether or not the aquaculture industry has any dialogue focused around maximizing ecosystem health rather than maximizing yield. And I think that's really kind of, it looks to me like the trends, based on what all the speakers are talking about today, that there's definitely a strong consideration and forward movement in that direction with regard to ecosystem health, even from the choice of even from the choice of what you decide to cultivate, what you decide to cultivate and the manner in which you decide to cultivate. I think all of the producers here, at least, appear to be working toward that goal. So I know we're starting to run out of time, but I do want to give a chance for everyone to just kind of touch on, just to kind of freestyle a little bit here. So before I knew anything in life, before the governor put up her aquaculture task force, and really what I knew about aquaculture, my limitations were basically aquaculture, aquaponics, tilapia in tanks, and that's about as far as we go. So what I'm interested to know, obviously the world is complex, and the world is our oyster, haha. So why don't, if I can get some time for some of the speakers to share with us what you see as the future of aquaculture in the region through the lens of sustainability. You can certainly touch on the role of technology, the changing workforce, local movements towards buying local, etc. So Dave, why don't we start right here at home with Mr. David Crisostomo?
Okay, thanks, Mel. It's a very complicated and convoluted situation with us. We are down in our aquaculture production to about 15% of what we were in the 90s. And so it's a reinvigorating kind of situation. And it's a program that I'm looking at within Sea Grant to reinvigorate our aquaculture, but directed more in a sustainable way than it was 20 years ago. And in light of that, the technology and the system designs within the land-based pond systems are going to have to be dramatically different than what they were, because there was a lot of effluent discharge and there was a lot of pollution in the streams, and there was a negative image into the community. But now we have, and I really appreciate our friends in the FSM and the shellfish growers in Hawaii who are looking at shellfish, and we've been touching base with Martin a little bit, talking about doing a giant clam project here in Guam and looking at it as a restorative project for the reefs and how they can even deal with microplastics and all of these national and international issues start to come up, that aquaculture can be a friend to the environment now, instead of a deterrent or a detrimental aspect into the environment. So we're trying to approach it in that regard. And so we've got stakeholders developed, a group of them, and we're meeting with government agencies, and we're trying to head back down that road to increase our aquaculture production, but doing it in a much more sustainable way than we have in the past. And I think coral production, which the agencies that regulate coral reefs, you know, they kind of cringe when you talk about coral aquaculture. But we need to talk with them and open that dialogue on how that can be a very contributing factor to bleaching in the reefs and not be a destructive kind of thing. And we can point to Kosrae and other areas that are doing coral farming and how it's been nothing but a benefit. And so we're looking forward to that.
Most definitely. How about you, Todd? In Hawaii, what do you see as the future of aquaculture in the region, and or even in the Hawaiian Islands specifically?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. You know, I'd like to again echo what everyone's saying, especially what David just commented on, is that the aquaculture industry typically a little while ago was sort of hidden, and nobody really was paying attention to it. But now with the regulations on like EPD, the NPDES permitting and effluent discharge and the impact everything has on the environments and everything else, it's being scrutinized. So how we move forward really has to take into account the impact these systems have on the ecosystem. And, you know, as everyone knows, the sustainability has to have the three things: economic, environmental, and social, right? And whether or not one operation can do all those things has always been a challenge, because you could be environmentally sustainable, but maybe not economically. So this is really what the puzzle is. And I think it has to go larger than one operation. It has to be a framework that is sustainable, so people can fit different operations and fit together, such as the fish ponds are part of it, the coastal regions are part of it, the land-based systems are part of it, and we have to be able to look at the whole thing, so that, because it's really difficult for a single operation to be all those three things. And the pressures that are being put on and the demands that are being put on these operations, some of them are going out of business, and it takes a lot of, and maybe there's some technology jumps that have to happen to get us there. But that's really the current puzzle that we're looking at, is how we're going to survive in the new world when social media and the technology is exposing everything. You want to be able to stand up to the scrutiny. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'd like to kind of close out with some of our growers. So Martin, can you talk to us a little bit about Kosrae and what you think about the future of aquaculture in Micronesia?
Thank you. David opened the road for me. From the beginning, 16 years ago when I started, it was always an attention. First, I have to survive with the industry, the ornamental trade. But secondly, we have to give back something to the ocean, because I saw that the bleeding is there. So over these 15 years, Jerry Hesslinger started at Palau, Rick Brelly in Australia, and then Steve Lindsay in Gosharai. So we know so much about giant clam farming. And it's such a sustainable operation with no pollution at all. It's the opposite. The science has proven that giant clam seems to be able to filter microplastic, and they expect that it's stored in the shell. Giant clams are producing tons amount of zooplankton, which is needed, badly needed, especially when you have a depleted, bleached reef area. So giant clams releasing worms like strings, brown strings. You can see them. And when you mix them with water, they become Susandelli. So if you have a healthy reef system with a high clam population, it's believed that a reef will faster recover. So our work, we are able to produce 100,000 of Hippopus clams. It's a very hardy clam, and this is what we can give back to the ocean. And I think that's the future. Doing it as a business, but having a total green. Basically, it's like what Uipo said. What they do with the oyster is similar to what we're doing. The water, what our clams filter, is more cleaner than before. So I think that's the future. And growing them in such a high amount, at some point, they will fertilize by themselves and reseed the ocean outside protected areas. And coral farming is the same thing. Our tables, they are in protected areas. We go in there and the fish are coming when we go there. Because as soon as we open the cage, the fish know there's a lot of food source next growing to the clams. And they're swimming with us. And sometimes we have to chase out the fish from the cages before we close them, because otherwise they're locked in the cage. So there's so much side effects, so much positive if you do it right. And I think Uipo and our operation, I think we can say that we are totally green operating our facility in a way that is sustainable and maybe most likely beneficial. You can see sea urchin growing in between the clams. It's a settlement for them. The predator cannot go to them because they are caged. They're growing in the cage. So sometimes we have to clean the tables, and we take out a ton of sea urchin. So there's so much benefit, and I hope that we can in Micronesia expand this one. I'm right now on Pohnpei. There's a small farm started, and I just teach them yesterday about parasites. But it's not a big deal. We can train people to do that.
Thank you so much, Martin. And because Kui had the best aquaculture joke to start, we're going to go ahead and let her conclude our session today. Now, Kui, we have in the audience individuals who are growers, prospective growers, also people who support them, and people concerned about the environment. How do you stay excited about your job? How do you stay committed to what you're doing and committed to giving back to the earth and to the ocean and to our ocean?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to even get to learn about this, because we are definitely pioneers in the Hawaii industry, and particularly in fish ponds. I think it's really amazing because we do put our oysters through a 48-hour depuration. That one of the things that makes me the happiest is someone to eat a raw oyster for the first time and have them go, wow, this was amazing. You know, just kind of, they'd always wanted them cooked, or they want sauce on them or whatever. So having that high quality of animal and product that people can really have a wonderful, that merwa that they're grown in, and then of course the depuration, so their belly's empty, no grit, no sand, no poop. That's really great. And then well, in my background, look where I work. That is my fish pond, our fish pond. So that's just the environment and having wonderful people around and watching, helping people grow. You know, that's the other thing that keeps me motivated.
All right, wonderful. Thank you again to everyone. I think I can speak for the whole audience when I say we are all happy as clams for all that we've learned today in this panel. I know that we have a lot going on to finish off today's session, but I'd like to thank you again. and for your time, for your dedication. And we wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Masti, Mel, and panelists for your work in advancing UN Sustainable Development Goals number 2, zero hunger, and number 6, clean water and sanitation.